and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's debate. My name is Priya Vamparala and I am the chairman, and Mr. Bonini is the timekeeper. This debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators who are Ms. Golding, Mr. LeBroy and Mrs. Lowen. The topic for this debate is that New Zealand should become the 7th state of Commonwealth of Australia. The affirmative team, seated to my right, is from Aberfoyle Park High School. The negative team, seated to my left, is from Endeavour College. The speaking time for this debate is 5 minutes with a double bell at the end of your speaking time. A warning bell will ring once at 4 minutes. A continuous bell will ring 30 seconds after the final debate. Please switch off your mobile phones and other electronic devices. I declare this debate open and I call upon the first affirmative speaker, Amina Agnes.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that New Zealand should become the 7th state of the Commonwealth of Australia. We define New Zealand as an island country in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, being one of Australia's closest neighbours geographically and previously an Australian colony. We define the term should become to mean given in-depth consultation and deliberation over an appropriate period of time and a consensus decision recognising the benefits and challenges of redefining our social and political structures that New Zealand take up the 1901 invitation, still enshrined in our constitution, to join the Federation of Australian States. We define the Commonwealth of Australia as a federal parliamentary democracy and a constitutional monarchy situated in the Southern Hemisphere, consisting of 6 states and 10 federal territories. We define the 7th state to mean that New Zealand retains the same sovereignty and status as the other 6 states within the Federation Agreement, as laid out by Clause 6 of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, which states that New Zealand may be admitted into Australia as a state. Section 121 provides the rules on how new states would be admitted. New Zealand would adopt Australia's currency, laws and regulations through this. We, the affirmative team, unwaveringly believe that this statement is true. Tonight, as first speaker, I will speak of the compatibility and similarities between the economic and political structures of New Zealand and Australia. Our second speaker will demonstrate the mutual, cultural and social benefits occurring from New Zealand becoming the 7th state within the Australian Commonwealth. Finally, our third speaker will present rebuttals and summarise our team's case. For my first point, New Zealand, completing a historic process of joining the Commonwealth of Australia, will significantly benefit both economies. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, they already share strong trade relations worth approximately 22 billion Australian dollars. Additionally, according to the Australian Parliament, the joining of New Zealand into the Commonwealth of Australia would provide a larger domestic market, offering more business to consumers and increasing competitiveness. The social dynamics and interconnection between New Zealand and Australia extend into their economic relationship. The close relations already established between Australia and New Zealand show the present compatibility that would facilitate a smooth transition and coexistence. Both nations are members of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, and they share a robust trade partnership. According to data from the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Australia consistently ranks as New Zealand's largest trading partner, with significant bilateral trade in goods and services. New Zealand joining the Australian Federation would result in more reliable access to capital and investment, and enable substantially greater efficiency in infrastructure and security. This leads to my second point, that important political benefits would result with New Zealand becoming the 7th state within the Commonwealth of Australia. According to the West Australian, New Zealand is facing the most challenging environmental issues in decades, amid a great power rivalry and with a military not fit for future challenges, according to a government review that lacked concrete plans to reverse the situation. With New Zealand becoming the 7th state within the Commonwealth of Australia, we will address issues as one nation, and, according to The Guardian, through that unified approach, we would be able to better ensure the safety and security of citizens and provide a strong deterrent against potential threats. Thus, the defence of the nation will strengthen, as will our political influence in the Pacific region. Moreover, as reported in news.com.au, our negotiating power on a global level will increase, as well as our diplomatic relations and ability to address crises. Barnaby Joyce, a member of the Australian House of Representatives, has backed calls to make New Zealand a part of Australia, arguing there would be huge military and economic benefits at a time of increasing instability in relations with both nations' major markets, such as with China. Becoming the seventh state will result in one voice in managing a quarantine crisis, such as in a global pandemic, trade negotiations, and particularly military policy in uncertain times, which will be highly beneficial to assuring future security and prosperity. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we, the Affirmative team, firmly believe that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia. Not only will an intertwined economy benefit both parties greatly, but political unity will guarantee the security and influence of our enlarged and enriched nation. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Asher Harper.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and Madam Chairperson. The topic of tonight's debate is that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia. We, the negative team, believe this statement to be utterly false, and we agree with the definition given by the affirmative team. This evening, I will be talking to you about the conflicting government policies between the two countries and how a union of the two countries would have an overall negative impact for New Zealand. Our second speaker, Samantha, will talk to you about the effects on the Maori people and the cultural differences between the two countries. Finally, our third speaker, Monique, will summarise our points and rebut the opposition. The affirmative team has tried to tell you that the two nations merging would provide lots of economic benefits. The New Zealand Foreign Affairs and Trade website states that New Zealand and Australia's economic relationships is underpinned by the Australia and New Zealand Close Economic Relationships, CER, recognised as the world's most comprehensive, effective and mutually compatible free trade agreement. This free trade agreement makes trade between New Zealand and Australia a lot easier than between any two other countries. And the close economic relations mean that they already have a lot of the economic benefits that would be gained from merging into one country. Additionally, the Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar are almost 10% different in value. This lack of true economic benefit makes the merge an unnecessary effort, especially with the hassle that the different currencies will bring. Now on to my first point. Back in 1901, New Zealand and Australia did consider becoming a federation. However, at that stage, New Zealand declined to become a part of Australia, principally because of the White Australia policy. The White Australia policy limited non-British migration to Australia. This policy was something that the New Zealand were strongly against, and ultimately, it prevented the two countries from uniting. While the White Australia policy was abolished 70 years later, the fact that it prevented the federation back in 1901 illustrates the problems that can arise when two countries have very different views on matters such as rules and values. If New Zealand were to become the seventh state of Australia, they would very likely have to follow whatever policies the Australian government determines. The reason for this is that although New Zealand would still have some power as a state parliament, based on their population, they would only hold about 1/6 of the seats of the Australian House of Representatives. Contrast that limits influence to their current situation, where they have to complete control over their rules, regulations, and policies that matter to them. Some of the responsibilities that New Zealand would hand to the federal government of United Australia would include foreign policy, defence, and monetary policy. In this speech, I'm going to give two examples from the areas of foreign policy and taxation that would be negatively influenced from a union of the two nations. New Zealand has been a nuclear-free zone since the mid-1980s. This means that they do not allow ships that are either fully or partially on nuclear power in their waters, nor do they allow any land-based nuclear activity or dumping of radioactive wastes into the oceans inside their nuclear-free zone. Contrast that position to what is happening in Australia. In recent years, Australia has focused considerable effort and money on obtaining nuclear-powered submarines for the Australian Navy. So how would this work if New Zealand was to become an Australian state? New Zealand would have to abandon their decades-old policy of not allowing nuclear-powered ships in their territory. Why? Because their limited influence as a single state of Australia means that they would no longer have control over their own policies. They would have to follow the rules the rest of Australia is following. Should we really expect the New Zealand people to turn their backs on their values in order to unite with Australia? According to The Guardian, New Zealand has already specifically stated that they will not allow Australia's nuclear submarines in their waters. So this is clearly something that they feel strongly about. If New Zealand was an Australian state, however, it wouldn't even be something that they had control over. My second point is about taxes and government policies. If New Zealand became the seventh state of Australia, then again, their limited influence in Parliament mean that New Zealand would lose considerable control over their monetary policies. Let me tell you what this would mean. According to the New Zealand Inland Revenue Department, there is an effective tax rate of 15.5% of an income of $48,000. In Australia, the Australian Taxation Office quotes a 24.6 effective tax rate on an income of $45,000. Think about that. That means that taxes would increase by 9.1% for all New Zealanders. Since taxes are distributed by the federal government, only a tiny proportion of this tax would be spent in New Zealand. To make things worse, the cost of living in Australia is significantly higher. The website simplenewzealand.com quotes the cost of living of the average person in Australia to be about $2,294 a month, whereas in New Zealand it is more like $2,043 a month. That is about a 12.3% increase in Australia. That doesn't seem like the everyday people in New Zealand would really benefit from. This is why New Zealand shouldn't become the seventh state of Australia. Thank you.
Essential wrap up.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Jessica Thornhill.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Australian Commonwealth. We, the Affirmative team, firmly believe this statement to be true. I will now discuss some of the flaws found in the opposition's argument. The first speaker of the negative team has attempted to argue that New Zealand and Australia have different foreign policy orientations and alliances that will complicate their relations with other countries if they were to unite. A united Commonwealth of Australia would provide a platform for coordinated diplomacy that respects both nations' interests and obligations. By aligning on key international issues, they could enhance their influence on their global stage, making their combined voice even more impactful in international forums. The first speaker of the negative team also mentioned that New Zealand and Australia have different environmental standards and commitments that would clash if they were to share a government. These differences can be addressed through negotiation and cooperation with a unified Commonwealth, as we spoke about in our definition. A shared government would establish common environmental goals while allowing for region-specific adjustments. This could lead to more effective environmental protection and conservation efforts through combined resources and expertise. Moving on, our first speaker has already discussed the political and economic benefits supporting our case. And as second speaker, I will discuss 2 points: the cultural enrichment and social benefits produced by New Zealand joining the Commonwealth of Australia. My first point is that the proposal for New Zealand to become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia is one rooted in historical, social dynamics and an interconnection that has always existed since Britain first colonised both our islands. A study by the Lowy Institute poll, 2023, found that Australians agreed that New Zealand is their closest friend in the world. Additionally, New Zealand and Australia have had a continuous flow of people intertwining and migrating across the Tasman for decades. According to data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in 2021, there were approximately 674,100 New Zealand-born residents in Australia, and travellers from New Zealand were the largest group of international arrivals, making up almost 40% of all visitors arriving for a short-term trip. Moreover, the existing arrangements regarding visa policies, student fees, and air travel have significantly reduced the barriers between our nations. The Trans-Tasman Travel Arrangement, announced on the 4th of February 1973, which allows for visa-free travel on the right to reside and work in either country, has been a testament to our connection and integration of our existing societies. According to Air New Zealand, there are more than 34 direct flights to and from Australia and New Zealand per day. This increased number of flights between both countries has enabled people to move more comfortably and efficiently, making a sense of partnership even stronger and creating a solid foundation for New Zealand's integration into the Commonwealth of Australia. This leads to my second point, the invaluable opportunity for mutual learning and growth of culture through this merger. New Zealand and Australia have cultural ties that date back to their colonial history. They both have English as their primary language, and according to global visa specialists, have similar lifestyles, sports, media, arts, and entertainment. For instance, rugby is a significant cultural phenomenon in both nations. The Bledisloe Cup, played by the All Blacks and Australian Wallabies, is one of the most highly anticipated sporting events in the region. This shared passion for sports contributes to cultural exchanges and mutual appreciation. The media, arts, and entertainment industries in New Zealand and Australia have also collaborated extensively. Co-production of classical music concerts, and in particular film and television series, such as The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, exemplify this collaboration. However, the most significant cultural aspect of this merger lies in the context of Indigenous rights and recognition. Australia has made important strides in this area with the Mabo decision and land rights legislation. And according to the Sydney Morning Herald, New Zealand's Treaty of Waitangi has been arguably even better at recognising the dignity and importance of an Indigenous voice. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Embassy, the Commonwealth of Australia provides means to strengthen democracy, development, and communication. Thus, bringing New Zealand into the Commonwealth of Australia creates a platform for diplomatic and cultural discourse, which enables a two-way street for the exchange of social expertise and cultural understandings. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we, the Affirmative team, firmly believe that New Zealand becoming the seventh state in the Australian Commonwealth would bring enormous benefits to both societies. Thank you.
I now call upon the second negative speaker, Samantha Perry.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and Madam Chairperson. The topic for tonight's debate is that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia. We, the negative team, believe this statement to be undisputedly false. Our first speaker, Asher, talked about how New Zealand's governmental influence would decrease and demonstrated the difference between the two countries' rules and values. Tonight, I'll speak about the effects on the Indigenous Maori people and New Zealand's identity as an independent country. Our third speaker, Monique, will be summarising our points and rebutting the opposition. I will start by rebutting the Affirmative team's arguments. The Affirmative team has tried to tell you that by merging, it would form a platform for discussion on certain issues. It won't, because New Zealand will become a single state of Australia. They won't hold as much influence, so they'll just have to go along with what Australia says. The Affirmative team has also tried to tell you that many Kiwis move to Australia anyway. While they are physically nearby, Australia and New Zealand are separate nations and therefore offer different lifestyles for those living in them. According to a post on First Move blog, Australia offers more career opportunities and big cities with a fast-paced lifestyle, while New Zealand values work-life balance and outdoor activities, with smaller cities and a slower pace of life. A difference in lifestyle between nations is especially important for people to live happy lives, and if Australia and New Zealand combine, their differences will fade. My first point is about how the Indigenous people of New Zealand will be affected by this decision. The Aboriginal people of Australia existed for almost 65,000 years prior to British colonisation, while Maori people are mere 700, the shortest human history of any country. Evidently, the culture created in those timeframes is vastly different. New Zealand's culture cannot be combined cohesively into the extensive ethnic history of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. If the combination was even attempted, can you imagine the outrage of the Maori people? Professor at both Auckland and Charles Sturt University, Dominic O'Sullivan told Interviewer on 6PR Mornings that New Zealand guaranteed Maori representation since 1867. I don't think there would be any enthusiasm from Maori people to lose that, and given we're struggling so much with the voice concept, it would expose some differences. These differences have been clearly explained to you by our first speaker. Speaking of the voice, which is reserved seats for Maori representatives in Parliament, I'm sure we can all agree that New Zealand has taken many more steps in including and respecting its Indigenous history, unlike Australia. Think of the upcoming referendum. How do you think the Maori people would respond when they would fit under the name of Indigenous Australians when they've worked so hard to be where they are today? How could two countries in completely different stages of Indigenous acceptance combine? Because New Zealand would not be equal to Australia, rather just apart, becoming lost in the sheer size of our country. Maori people would effectively be losing their homeland as they know it and handing over their culture to Australia in the name of small benefits. So no, New Zealand should not become Australia's seventh state. My second point is about New Zealand's identity as an individual country. New Zealand has built their own nation after declining to join Australia in the Federation in 1901, including creating their own flag, their own national anthem, and even their own currency. All of this would have to be revoked in the name of becoming an Australian state. In 2015 to 16, a referendum was held to decide the flag of New Zealand, costing the government over $16 million, according to CNBC. In the end, over 50% of voters opted to keep the current flag, which is why it's still flying today. If the country was willing to spend that much money and still pick their own flag, how would the nation feel about adopting Australia's? While it might seem from afar that Australia's economy would improve by adding New Zealand as a state, most of that money would realistically have to be spent on converting New Zealand branded products and merchandise anyway. Another important part of New Zealand culture that would be discarded is the national anthem. New Zealand's national anthem, God Defend New Zealand, has been the national anthem of New Zealand since 1977, older than Australia's by almost a decade. Their national anthem also has a verse in traditional Maori language, which conveys an important part of New Zealand's history. Former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jim Bolger, says, "I think that the New Zealand anthem fits very well into who we are as New Zealanders, and I particularly like it when it's sung in Maori." Another fundamental part of New Zealand that will be scrapped is the New Zealand dollar, the currency of New Zealand, the Cook Islands, Tokeloa, and a few other places. The currency of an entire country converted. That's no small feat, nor small expense. New Zealand should not become Australia's seventh state, as it would cost the loss of all these significant parts of New Zealand, plus a multitude of others. To even become an Australian state, New Zealanders would have to give up everything that represents their country, and who on earth wants to do that? To conclude, New Zealand should not become the seventh state of the Australian Commonwealth, as the Maori people and New Zealand would face losing their entire identity. I'll leave you with this excerpt from an article of the Maori experience. After all, it was not his land that had been stolen, confiscated, and manipulated out of his hands. It was not his language that had experienced a violent and abusive history of eradication. Thank you.
now call upon the third affirmative speaker, Aberfoyle.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia. We, the affirmative team, firmly believe this statement to be true. I now move on to rebutting the opposition team's arguments. The first speaker of the negative team has attempted to argue that New Zealand and Australia have different foreign policy orientations and alliances that would complicate their relations with other countries if they were to unite. However, a united Commonwealth could facilitate a more nuanced and balanced foreign policy. Any differences could be seen as strengths. New Zealand's and Australia's strong commitment to environmental issues are different, yet complementary to our economic and strategic interests. Together, we could lead by example in promoting sustainable development and addressing global challenges. A unified approach would provide a structured platform for managing their foreign relations, allowing them to leverage their individual strengths while presenting a unified front on the critical international matters. The first speaker of the negative team then mentioned that New Zealand and Australia have different environmental standards that would clash if they were to share a government. In fact, a united Commonwealth government could provide a framework for harmonizing these standards and commitments over time. Ambitious targets could be set to develop innovative technologies and share best practices to address environmental challenges effectively. Moreover, their differences can be seen as complementary. New Zealand's focus on sustainable agriculture and conservation aligns well with Australia's vast land and natural resource management expertise. The first speaker of the negative team then finally attempted to argue that New Zealand and Australia have different economic priorities that would not be well served by a single government. These differences could be a source of strength rather than a weakness. A single government could provide a platform for collaboration and coordination between the two countries, allowing for a more nuanced approach to economic policy. For instance, New Zealand's focus on agriculture and tourism complements Australia's mining and natural resources sector. Moreover, a unified approach could enhance trade negotiations, allowing the two nations to collectively bargain for better deals on the global stage. Further, economic differences can be bridged through dialogue and cooperation, as we mentioned in our definition. The second speaker on negative team has attempted to argue that New Zealand has married people who have things like the Treaty of Waitangi that recognise their rights and culture. A unified Commonwealth could reaffirm its commitment to the Treaty of Waitangi, preserving Maori rights and cultural heritage. This arrangement could even pave the way for new understanding on Australia's part and shared initiatives aimed leading to the empowerment and recognition of all Indigenous communities. Cultural exchange and cooperation can be a means of celebrating diversity and promoting mutual respect without undermining the uniqueness and integrity of any culture. The goal should be to create an inclusive and harmonious environment where different cultures can coexist and thrive, fostering a sense of unity, shared identity, while also honouring individual cultural identities. Finally, the second speaker of the negative team has attempted to argue that New Zealand has a distinct national identity and culture that would be overshadowed by joining Australia. This overlooks the fact that cultural preservation isn't mutually exclusive with joining Australia. In fact, this move could enhance New Zealand's global recognition and influence while preserving its unique culture, as other sovereign Australian states continue to celebrate. Additionally, according to the New Zealand Ministry for Culture and Heritage, New Zealand's unique identity is resilient and adaptable. It has evolved over time while retaining its core elements. Joining the Commonwealth of Australia as its seventh state would allow New Zealand to leverage its distinctiveness within a larger political framework, potentially amplifying its cultural contributions to the world stage. Now to summarise our team case. Our first speaker showed the compatibility and the benefits of merging the two economies, which to provide a larger domestic market, more business opportunities, and increased choice and competitiveness for consumers. She then went on to show the important political and regional security benefits that will accrue from a unified approach to better ensure the safety and security of citizens and provide a strong deterrent against potential threats. Our second speaker first showed that our case is one rooted in the historical social dynamics and interconnection that has always existed since Britain first colonized both islands, a testament to the already existing integration of our societies. She then demonstrated the invaluable opportunity for mutual learning and growth of culture, particularly in the context of recognizing the dignity and historical rights of Indigenous peoples. To conclude, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it is highly desirable that New Zealand take up the 1901 invitation, still enshrined in our Constitution, to join the Federation of Australian States. Thank you.
I now call upon the third negative speaker, Monique Beattie.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson and ladies and gentlemen. I'm your third speaker for the negative team of this debate, Monique Beattie, and I will be summarising the points from the first and second speakers' speeches of my team. The topic of this evening is that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia, and we, the negative team, disagree with this for many reasons. Before I summarise my teammates' speeches, I will be rebutting points from the previous speakers' statements. The affirmative team has tried to tell you that as a New Zealand politician backs the idea, it is worthwhile considering. However, they are one former politician, one New Zealander. The majority of the other New Zealanders strongly dislike the idea of joining Australia. Christopher Luxon, a New Zealand opposition leader, flat out says, "No, there is no way in hell we're joining Australia." For a union like this to be successful, both parties need to fully agree that joining together will have enough benefits to be worth the effort, and New Zealand has showed a clear disinterest in doing so. The affirmative team has tried to tell you that the combined military will make our national defence stronger. While they do have independent defence forces, Australia and New Zealand already have a strong joint military force, the ANZAC. This military connection is quite intimate, and they have been working together since 1915, forming during World War I. We already have this joint military as a powerful asset, so combining countries in the name of protection really is not necessary. The affirmative team has tried to tell you that New Zealand should be part of Australia, as New Zealand has already has close ties with Australia. Australia and New Zealand already reap the most important benefits from their proximity, such as the ANZAC and free trading, so combining these two nations is unnecessary. The affirmative team has tried to tell you that New Zealand and Australia already have a similar culture. Well, what exactly do we have in common? A love of sports, beautiful natural scenery? Many other countries have this too, but the proximity of our two countries is making people see the magnified version of these similarities. Dominic O'Sullivan, professor, says this: Australia and New Zealand may well be similar enough for political union to be an idea worth considering, but rejecting, if only to help us each to understand ourselves better. Lots of people have moved between New Zealand and Australia for the slightly different cultures, and merging the nations will make millions of those living on either island unhappy, as the quirks in their culture and way of life fade. The public already mistake New Zealand as a part of Australia often. Do we really want to reinforce this and damage New Zealand's identity even further? The affirmative team has tried to tell you that New Zealand was a lot more accepting towards the Indigenous, the Maori. According to the Institute of Public Affairs, the Maori voice to Parliament has driven policies which compromise community safety through race-based policing which is soft on violent crime. And there are plenty of other policies that bias towards the Maori. These policies are discriminatory towards all other races, and therefore go against the core values of a democracy. Should we really be learning from these policies that sacrifice equality to account for a single race? Now I will be summarising the first speaker's speech from our team, Asha. If New Zealand were to join Australia, many of their policies and regulations that they believe are important will have to be changed or even eradicated because of Australia's greater influence. This is unfair to New Zealand because they have policies that contradict Australia's. Therefore, they should not have to change their important regulations just to be a part of Australia. If New Zealand became Australia's seventh state, then taxes would go up significantly in New Zealand, and their cost of living will become higher as well. This change isn't a benefit for New Zealanders at all, because only a small portion of the money they spend on taxes will be spent in New Zealand. Now I will be summarising the second speaker's speech from our team, Samantha. The Maori people of New Zealand would not appreciate this change. This is because the history and culture of the Maori people compared to Indigenous Australians is very different. And this change would essentially be trying to combine these two very different communities, which is not fair to the Maori people after how hard they worked to be in the position they are in today. For New Zealand to become a state of Australia, they would need to change many aspects of their country's identity. This is not fair to New Zealand, as important aspects that define their country, such as their flag, national anthem, and currency, would be discarded and forgotten just so they can join Australia. In conclusion, we, the negative team, disagree that New Zealand should become the seventh state of the Commonwealth of Australia. We believe this because New Zealand's tax costs would go up and the Maori people of New Zealand will not appreciate this change. Additionally, for New Zealand to join Australia, they would need to change many of their important regulations and important aspects of their identity. Thank you for listening.
The adjudicators will now finalise the result.
Oh, okay.
Complimentary
There it
Christmas
is.
while you wait. Anybody?
I'm not sure what he said.
We had a
I want a coffee.
That kind of what we're going to get rid of.
Yeah, you're going to get your steps in tomorrow. What's the does that mean? Positive. Damaging winds, possible in the morning.
No, you made sense though. You did the reason right behind because that's what I made
Yeah, it's ideally, no, it's not ideal for me. I'll just bring my jacket up. Yeah. No, not alone. I imagine he did. I saw him text those in the groups.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm James, part of your three-person adjudicator panel, with my lovely other two adjudicators behind you. So first things first, I want to congratulate everyone for making it to the semi-finals. We had a really good debate today, really close, and I'm sure that to be here, your seasons must have been equally impressive. So give them a round of applause, please. So, very quickly, I'm going to tell you how tonight's going to go. I'm going to first hand out the speaker award. I won't be giving any individual speaker feedback, as there's three of us adjudicators, and I'm not going to make you all sit through all of them. I don't want to be here that much. So, the speaker who we chose spoke excellently. She conveyed ideas very well and impressed all of us adjudicators. Her decision as best speaker was unanimous. Tonight, that award goes to Samantha Perryman. Now, when I say this debate was close, I mean I think it was won by a single point for one speaker between three adjudicators.
Wow.
And one seems to hate us for that. Despite the longest part. So, this was a split decision as well. Now, the reason that we've awarded it to the winning team tonight is that we believe they showed a slightly stronger conveyance of their arguments and they demonstrated slightly better team cohesion. Now, the answer you've all been waiting for. We award tonight's debate to the Affirmative team. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, and I'll hand over to our adjudicator to finish off the debate.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team to give a vote of thanks.
First, I'd like to thank the audience for coming out here and supporting us today. I'd like to thank all the teachers that came out to just give us that extra support. Dr. Pollett for coaching our team, Mr. Benini for stepping in as timekeeper. I'd like to thank the opposition for your amazing arguments. Good job. I'd like to thank the adjudicators for giving their time to make this debate happen. And I'd really, really like to thank Asha and Monique, who actually stepped in last minute to speak to this debate. So I really like to big thanks to them.
I call upon a member of the winning team to second that word of thanks.
I'd first like to give a big thank you to the opposition team for putting up such a great argument tonight. As the adjudicator said, it was very close. I'd like to thank the audience for coming out and watching our debates, and especially our parents for coming and dropping us off at this facility. I'd like to thank the three adjudicators for spending their time to mark and judge our debates, and also our timekeeper and chairperson, and especially our coach, Miss Farrell, who spent countless recesses and lunches with us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.